Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we discuss day-to-day problems people face in their lives. Let's start with the video.
In this atrocious life, we may run into the worst kinds of people, and life allows them to leave indents on our memory and create bad souvenirs that stick with us for as long as we live. We can choose to handle those people however we find appropriate, even though at times the best way to handle these crap stains is by pretending they don't exist. And at other times, ignoring them can be a tedious mission because they're supposed to be people you're relying on and the people with the most influence on you. I'm talking about the unlucky people whose families or in-laws are the definition of an atrocious group of people. I consider my relationship with my in-laws to be some of the few horrific interactions I've had in my life. Although I'm very privileged to be surrounded by kind, loving, and welcoming people for the majority of my time, I was immediately hit with the realization that it would come to an abrupt halt when I met my then boyfriend's family. I've been very aware of the financial difference between my boyfriend and I, and the huge gap between the money I have and the money that he grew up with. I've never been a superficial or materialistic person, but the obvious difference between the quality of life I lived up until the point I met my boyfriend and the one his family was used to was always something I took into consideration whenever I invited them or asked them to come over for meals or anything at all. I always try to buy the best quality ingredients and come up with the most expensive and bougie ideas, even though I cringed at myself each time I remembered the materialistic nature of what I was doing. When you're in a situation like that, in which you're trying to please the people that could possibly become your immediate family, it stops being about materialistic manifestations of money and becomes about attempting to fit into a criteria of people that you are unfamiliar with handling and that you'll spend a good chunk of your life tied to. Even when I allowed myself to be shallow, I sensed the obvious range of comparison between me and my in-laws. At first, it was about trying to impress them and feeling like I'm part of their family, but I started realizing just how impossible it was for me to ever achieve that, regardless of the fact that everybody was aware of how serious my boyfriend and I's relationship was, and that eventually I would be holding the same last name as everyone. Everybody still treated me like an outsider and an outcast, and I couldn't help but notice and feel hurt by it. It used to be a dream of mine to hold my future husband's last name and bring children into the world that would feel a sense of belonging. But the more I interacted with my in-laws, the more it became evident that I needed to discard this fantasy of mine. It just felt like me getting their last name would only make me hate me more and feel the need to show me how much of an outsider I will always be to them. Some extended family members were sometimes nice to me and made me feel welcome, which is why my husband and I decided to announce our wedding date at one of his cousin's engagement parties. The week after our big announcement to the family, I got a phone call from father-in-law, in which he blatantly told me that he wouldn't be attending our wedding. Not sure if it was my authority figure phobia or the utter shock I was hit with when he said that his reasoning was because my wedding wouldn't be aesthetically pleasing to him. But he followed it up by saying his wife and 2 daughters would also be avoiding attending a wedding of different origins. Not only did his message confirm all the concerns and suspicions I had about their sarcastic, subtle, discriminatory jokes, it also left my husband and I infuriated by the audacity to talk down to me in that tone. Imagine my husband's shock and offense when his dad not only announced he wouldn't be attending his wedding on a rushed phone call for no valid or excusable reason, but speaking to his wife as if he was casually canceling a dinner reservation or a pre-order with a complete stranger. It obviously didn't stop us from getting married and possibly didn't even influence the quality of our wedding. But as someone who considers family holy and cherishes these one-in-a-lifetime milestones, weddings, I spent the most important day of my life with a subtle hinge of anxiety, knowing my husband wouldn't feel the sense of loving that rushed through my body whenever I landed my eyes on my parents during the ceremony. I'm writing this as my newborn baby is finally resting for the first time in what feels like days, and I'm happy to say that I no longer feel the sense of insecurity or need to prove myself and secure my position in my family. I live by the absolute conviction that my family can only be composed of the people that choose to love and care and be there for me, such as my husband and hopefully my child in the future. My parents visited me a couple of days ago, only contributing to my newly found convictions by showing me what a true family is supposed to look like and what actually being supported feels like. Still, as much as I don't care nor need parents-in-law's presence in my life or my relationship with my husband, the fact that they refuse to remain in contact with their son because they dislike the financial gap that was between us when we started dating still disturbs me. Not only that, but as I'm adjusting to my newly found parenthood, it terrifies to let my kid out into the world full of these people and the possibility that he'd be trapped into a familial relationship with them. Side note, oh, my parents brought me Christmas gifts and some holiday-themed newborn outfits for my baby boy. I couldn't resist the need to post them on Facebook despite my dislike of mediatizing children. My father-in-law commented on the post at least a dozen times and called me and my husband relentlessly, begging us to let him come visit at our home and be introduced to his grandchild. He was begging to enter the very home he refused to attend our wedding at, and though it makes me feel a sense of satisfaction to know that things are finally going in the karmic direction they should have gone through a long time ago, my heart still aches for how desperate he sounds and what I could be depriving him of. Nevertheless, I'm putting my foot down and sticking to my ground because this is no longer about whether I'm able to forgive him or not. Now, this is about making sure my kid doesn't grow up around people that would influence him into growing into a terrible human being and possibly treating and making people feel just as horribly as I felt all this time. I would do more than allow father-in-law the dread and regret of his own actions to make sure my son doesn't become an atrocious person to someone else in the future. Not the a-hole. He definitely had it coming. Should have known that treating people like crap is inevitably going to land him in a position of regret. It's not your job to teach him lessons, but it is yours to express your emotions rightfully and not swallow them because you don't want to hurt others or get back at the people who harmed you, especially not when they're this heartless. Not the a-hole. I think father-in-law should be deprived of the amazing feeling that one gets when they finally get to hold her grandchild. As a grandparent myself, one of the best feelings I've ever experienced was getting a doll for my grandchild for the first time and having the ability to create a strong sense of connection between us. How terrible your father-in-law and mother-in-law treated you has had no seemingly obvious consequences. Maybe this is just the universe's way of telling them that everything they ever did comes back to bite them in the ace by separating them from the grandchild they've been waiting for their entire lives. Not the a-hole. I'm not going to ask you to try and be understanding of why father-in-law is being so desperate to meet his grandchild, and I won't insinuate that you're being cruel by not letting him see your little boy. I also think you genuinely shouldn't let him in contact with your child anytime soon. But I think at some point you're going to have to let your guard down and allow your kid to have a relationship with his grandparents for the sake of his own full development, even if it's superficial and not one that would allow him to be influenced by them. Next story. Mother-in-law isn't actually a huge kid, so I didn't think she's even upset, but some people are saying I'm wrong on principle. Mother-in-law agreed to watch our kids for a few days when we went on a couple's trip. We were having some marital issues and really needed that time, so I do appreciate it. Mother-in-law isn't particularly close to our kids, but she does have the fun house, so they were all for it. Mother-in-law has a stepdaughter who is my husband's half-sister. I'll call her Addie. Addie's mom was a waitress who had a threesome with mother-in-law and father-in-law and ended up getting pregnant. Addie had a bit of an unconventional childhood due to this, but mother-in-law decided to have fun with it and take on a cool aunt role and spoiled the absolute hell out of this kid. Addie is pretty unbearable. Addie got married 9 months ago and had a huge lavish wedding and was an absolute bridezilla. She recently found out he's cheating and had been cheating all during the wedding planning and is obviously gutted. At some point, while mother-in-law was babysitting, she took my kids to Addie's house because Addie didn't want to be alone. Mother-in-law convinced Addie that she should come and stay with them and not be alone. She's going to divorce and probably sell the house. He's living separately. Addie agreed, but before she left, she damaged most of his belongings. She cut one arm or leg off all of his clothes, and the guy likes clothes. They're wealthy, so I'm talking Italian suits, designer stuff, and the whole wardrobe. Mother-in-law was just laughing as it happened. My kids witnessed some of this because they told me about it. I was furious. I called mother-in-law and confronted her. Mother-in-law said I was being an a-hole and should have more sympathy. I said she was totally irresponsible for allowing my kids to witness that and brushing it off like a joke. Addie overheard, grabbed the phone, and started screaming at me. So I said she is trash, but look at how she was born. Who can blame her? Mother-in-law took the phone back and called me a witch. I said she was never watching my kids again and she's a crappy grandmother and hung up. Father-in-law is furious and says I'm being mean to his daughter. Mother-in-law texted that she might have overcompensated because she wanted to be supportive despite thinking monogamy is dumb. But she said what I said to Addie was unforgivable and I need to apologize, and if not, she can see why her son is divorcing me, which he isn't. Right now, no one is talking and my husband even thinks I overreacted. This is an everyone sucks here if I ever saw one. Your sister-in-law is a very hurt a-hole who destroyed someone's property. Your mother-in-law is an a-hole for allowing two small kids to watch an act of malicious vindictiveness, not to say anything about the legality of destruction, and behaved as if it were trivial. And you are a first-class a-hole for attributing this behavior not to your sister-in-law's pain and to your mother-in-law's lack of judgment, but to her being the offspring of a threesome, as if how one is conceived plays any role in their morality. Everyone sucks here except father-in-law, who's just being protective of his daughter being attacked for the circumstances of her conception, and your kids who didn't do anything wrong here. You don't attack people for the circumstances of their birth. Side-eyeing you, OP. You don't commit crimes in front of children. Side-eyeing your mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and you don't need to make some grand announcement. You should have quietly made this decision and only discussed it if you were ever asked about it. You aren't an a-hole for the decision you made about who you want to be watching your kids, but your way of announcing it and attacking sister-in-law the way you did made you one of the biggest a-holes here. You're the a-hole, ungrateful for childcare, judgmental of others' lifestyles, making unfounded personal attacks, and absolutely overreacting. Your children weren't endangered in any way. They saw some behavior you would rather they not replicate. But that just means you should talk to them about the awful things people sometimes do in anger and what is and isn't okay. Fine for you to have told your mother-in-law that they shouldn't have been made witness to that. Fine for you to decide to stop using her for childcare. But calling to yell at them, calling people trash, you're not modeling good behavior for your kids yourself with that kind of talk. Next story. I know the title is going to get people riled up, but hear me out on this. I, 31 female, have been dating dude, 29 male, for 8 months. It has been great. He has a dog that's 8 that he has had since she was a puppy. I have nothing against dogs. I'm just not a fan of owning them simply because 1, I live in an apartment and I feel they need a yard, and 2, I don't want to do all the cleanup that is involved with them. He takes his dog most places with him, which is fine. She is very well behaved and has never caused any problems. In my place, I have an elderly cat as well as a guinea pig, gerbils, 3 fish tanks, and a partridge in a pear tree. I usually go over to his place to hang out for the sake of his dog. The other day, he offered to come over to my place to hang out and help me install a new wall mount. I said it was fine without asking if it was okay first or even bringing it up to me. He had brought his dog with him. My apartment doesn't allow dogs even as guests, so I had a bit of anxiety about it. His dog was doing fine when suddenly she started barking like crazy, which seemed out of character for her. Dude then said, "Oh, I forgot. You should put your animals away in a locked room." I asked why, and he laughed and said with a smile, "Dog's name is Murderer. She killed my ex's rabbit. She got into the cage and everything. They aren't safe until they're locked in a room." I was pissed. He knew I had small animals. This wasn't a surprise thrown at him, and he knew about this issue and brought his dog over without permission or warning. I told him he needed to leave now and take the dog with him. He isn't invited over anymore. He got upset and called me a dog hater. Said that is just how dogs are and I should be more accepting of her. I didn't respond, just continued to push him out the door. Am I the a-hole here? Edited to add, my friends are chipping in telling me this is just my anti-dog mentality coming out and that I should be more open to doggos. It really is frustrating. I don't understand how some people can be so love blind to a dog. Edited to add too. Holy crap, this blew up. I'm on my break from work, but a quick answer to a question many have raised about what if the time came for us to move in together. Moving in with a partner is not an endgame goal for me with relationships. In all of my relationships, even serious and long term, I've preferred to live separately, so the pets having to live together would never be an issue. Not the a-hole. He knew that your pets would be in danger with his dog in your house, and yet he brought her there. Honestly, I think you should break up with him because he has no respect for you or your pets, and they could be in danger if someday you decide to live together. His dog's behavior says a lot about him as a pet owner. A well-trained dog would never kill other animals. Laughing at his ex's rabbit's death is a red flag. Wait, what the actual F? He knows his dog has killed his ex's small pets. He knows you have small pets. Yet, he brought his dog over without a specific dog invite? That's a huge red flag. Original poster. You're not the a-hole, but he sure is. He showed a total disregard for your pets, your apartment, and a lack of respect and consideration for you. Dogs can be trained. My elderly lab, a bird hunting dog by nature, became friends with my green cheek conure, as did my rescue cat. Your boyfriend seems really nonchalant about the whole girlfriend pet massacre situation. Not the a-hole. Dude knew about his dog's behavior, knew you had small animals, and still brought his dog without even bothering to ask if he could or telling you about the issues so that you could make an informed decision. He was very disrespectful to you. Next story. My, male 24 dad, recently passed away. In his will, he left damn near everything to me because was his only child. This includes his property, which was 100% paid off. My dad's girlfriend, not wife as they were never married, had been with him for 7 years and made a huge stink about not being left anything at all in his will. We ended up having to go to court over the issue, and she ended up getting 50% of the value of what he had attained during their time together. However, this doesn't include his property as it was fully paid prior to them being together. After all the paperwork was done and everything was in my name, I told her that I had no issue continuing to live there, but she'd have to pay rent at market value. $2,700 USD a month easily. She and her mother lived leeched off my dad for years, paying absolutely nothing, and I was fully aware that she couldn't afford this. She got really upset with me, saying your dad would be disappointed and disgusted, and tried to use her mother being unwell as an excuse to try to stay for free minimal rent. I simply told her that the place is in my name, and I can do and will do what I please. Her options were to pay rent or move out. I did agree to give her 1 month to get her things together. I even went as far as to say I would sell the place if I had to, and we'll see if the new owner lets her freeload. My girlfriend and grandparents think I'm being harsh, but I simply have had enough of her leeching off us, and it's stopping now. Not the a-hole. You should make it clear that you will pursue charges if she damages anything on the property, and then take pics of everything as it is right now. Not the a-hole. Your dad left everything to you, and she went ahead and disregarded his wishes and sued you for his estate anyway. She burned up any goodwill she may have deserved when she did this. She knew your dad wanted you to have everything. He made that clear in his will, yet she didn't care about his last wishes or what he wanted. Talk about your dad being disappointed and disgusted.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.